Yeah, so it shows like your best. Yeah, so thanks. So we're close to 11. So if you guys want to find your seats and get settled. Okay. Oh, yeah. Okay. Okay. So make sure to help yourself to, you've got coffee and tea and some water and bubbly water as well in the back. And the restrooms are straight through the double open doors. Give it a couple more minutes. We'll have some folks virtually and in person that are participating. Let's press it once. Can the virtual participants hear Nicole?
Yes, we can.
Thank you.
Too close to the other side. Just before you get in the door, I don't know. I think we're okay. Usually was the lady next door to that, so people- Get out.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and begin. I first off just want to start by thanking everyone for taking time out of their busy schedules. And I also just wanted to acknowledge that there was some fairly late notice happening. And therefore appreciate even more your flexibility in being able to make it here today. My name is Penelope Powell, and I'm with the Penelope Partnership. I recognize many of the faces in the room, but for those of you who are not in the partnership, we are a nonprofit serving the western slope of Colorado, and we work to strengthen the regional food system. And we do that a number of different ways, working across the food supply chain. At one end, we are supporting producers through education with things like the Food and Farm Forum, as well as we have kicked off a beginner farmer rancher program. And we also work at the other end of the spectrum with consumers and ensuring they know the importance of local food, where to purchase local food, as well as ensuring that all members of our community can access that food. And then we work in between, connecting the two through things like the farmers market and through some work with the regional food system partnership grant. We've been doing a planning grant to explore ways that we can share common pool resources with things such as and we're even exploring other common pool resources like equipment and labor, but the main focus has been with data and how we can use and share that data to create efficiencies in our regional food system. So that's a little bit of a smattering of what we're doing. We are very honored to host this meeting today, and I'm going to go ahead and pass it off to the person right now. I'm gonna have
Hi, everybody. My name is Woody Simpson. I live in Steamboat Springs, Colorado, so I live in Route, so I drive about 4.5 hours to be here. And I work with Colorado State University as part of the new Food System Institute. And in that role, I have a number of different roles and responsibilities. But one of the things that I've done in that position is helped with these regional food summits. I'm also the chair of the Northwest Colorado Food Coalition and have been in that role for about 3 years, helping our community think through a lot of the same topics that we're going to be covering here today. The coalition has been in place for a number of years and has done a lot of really interesting things, bringing different people across the food system together to think about innovative solutions to problems that we face. And so, in that role, I got to attend the Colorado Food Summit, which happened in January of 2020. And we'll hear a little bit more about that kind of as we go. But after that event, one of the things that came out of it was asking everybody in the state to go to Denver in January. It's not necessarily, the best. and so, are there opportunities of bringing together closer to their homes, closer to their place? So we really make those connections and then kind of funnel up that information or ideas or concepts to the state level and have more of a dialogue, but not necessarily putting the responsibility or that time and energy to get to Denver on you. So this really is an effort to respect and appreciate all that you do in your own communities and really bring together a conversation that you can have amongst yourselves and then try and funnel that up and down the chain.
Thank you. We have Mr. Paul Birdsall, who I'm going to give, I think he's already probably introduced himself to the virtual team, but Paul, will you just tell us who you are and your role since you're with us?
Of course. Thanks, Penelope. Hello, everyone. So glad to have you all here. My name is Paul Burtz. I'm with Jolly Events. We are working with all of the regional gatherings for the food summits, kind of with the event planning coordination, basically helping out any way we can. So super excited to be here with all of you. I'll be in the chat. So if y'all have already provided some great feedback, so thank you. I think the biggest thing, Penelope, is if we can make sure we are in front of the speaker or the microphone as much as possible. That would be super helpful for our virtual participants. Other than that, we're in good shape.
Okay. I think Libby is also looking at the chat. So if that's not getting better, I don't think I've ever been told you can't hear me. I have a very loud projecting voice, but I will aim to project even more. So yes, so let's go over the agenda. Oops. It was working earlier. Okay. Hold on. Okay, we'll do it the old-fashioned way. So we're going to start by looking at objectives, and then we're going to just do a little bit of who's in the room today. And yes, that will mean getting up and doing a little icebreaker. I know that phrase makes some people cringe, but this is also about getting to know one another and who's in the room. And then we're going to do 3 or 4 activities where we reflect on the past, share about the present, envision the future, and then also think about what does a welcoming space mean and look like, as well as what does representation look like, and then discuss next steps. I'm going to go ahead and be very transparent. I have no idea how time management's going to go with these activities. So we'll see how that flows, and hopefully we will get through all that. If not, we can determine what we want to do from there. Just a little bit of housekeeping. This event is being recorded. And so I just want everyone to know that. I hope that doesn't inhibit your participation, but I want you to hear that. And part of that purpose is there will be an artist who will observe our meeting and create a graphic representation of our region. And then that graphic representation will be displayed at the statewide summit. Okay. We do have a lot of, even within this room, diverse representation, including online. And so I didn't know, I wanted us to start with just some basic ground rules amongst our team as well, or team. See, look, we're already a team. I've dawned it on us. So I understand many of you have important roles in your life, but if we can at least make sure our cell phone sounds are turned off, that would be great. The bathrooms, as I mentioned earlier, are through the double doors. These are some things that I thought of that when I've been in groups are helpful. Listening with an open mind, respecting differences of opinion, think before you talk. That's one I struggle with sometimes. Step up and step down as far as participation goes. Like if you're noticing you're not participating so much, kind of bringing forth some inner courage. And then if you're talking a lot, kind of making sure there's space for others to contribute as well. And then let's not forget our virtual participants. They can see us, but we're not seeing them. Paul, how many folks do we have virtually at this time?
Looks like we've got 5 folks with us.
Okay, great. So, and I will also be working to remember virtual participants. Are there any other ground rules that we want to bring to the table as a group? Sherry, did you have something? Yep, we sure will. So we just had a question from the audience about when the dates of the food summit will be, and I will talk about that. But any other kind of basic ground rules before we move forward that folks want to put forth? Okay, moving on though. So why are we here today? We want to ensure we are lifting up regional voices in the statewide food and agricultural visioning and policy processes to build bridges across the state and move towards a shared food and ag vision. So we could even think of it like a mini UN. Themes that are emanating from these conversations, and they're happening across the state, will guide the content of the statewide food summit. From there, and that will be in December 2022. They have not set an exact date yet, but I am committed to this group that I will inform you as soon as I know. And as well as I'm sure there'll be lots of publication about that. But right now they put it in December. So that is the current plan. So why does that matter? Some of you may be familiar with the with the statewide summit. I know I was speaking with Elizabeth earlier in Cedar Ridge, and she was saying that she has been a presence at that in the past. For those that aren't aware of what that is or why that even matters, is there's a group called the Colorado Food System Advisory Council present at that summit. This council was established in 2010 through Senate Bill 10106 as an advisory committee to make recommendations to the General Assembly and to appropriate regulatory agencies. So they're not making policy, but they are guiding and recommending to those who are making policy. So they are going to be at the statewide summit, listening, gathering information, and utilizing that to write their white papers and things of that nature. So the charge of the council is to advance recommendations that strengthen healthy food access for all of Colorado through Colorado agriculture and local food systems and economy. So they are the state conduit for hearing, reviewing, and advancing critical food system issues in which the state government does or could play a role. Okay. I want to make sure that all that makes sense, kind of that like chaining of events. That was important for me to really understand of like, again, kind of why all this matters. The idea is that these regional groups are informing the state summit, then we have some major players at the state summit that are then informing policy and legislation. Okay. Couldn't tell Kathy if you had a question there. No. Okay. Thinking, yeah. So in an effort to accomplish that charge, they held one in January of 2020, which Libby mentioned. And they learned many lessons from that. I don't know if it was a first summit. It was the first summit. So they learned many lessons in that space, and they're trying to learn from those lessons. And one of the things that they want to do is ensure that diverse voices from across the state and food system are heard, and that those voices feel safe and welcomed. So that's part of what we're going to accomplish today and explore as well, is information that will feed into the planning of that. So similar, but a little different is what are our objectives? So what do we hope to accomplish today? First, which will be the quickest thing that we do, is generate a shared understanding of what is meant by a food system. We want to, as we've been saying, well, I haven't said this yet, but raise awareness across sectors, food and agriculture sectors within this region. So also sharing about what are we already doing to work across sectors and strengthen our food system. We also want to identify priority needs and opportunities in the region in regards to agriculture and food systems. And then, as this part I have said, lift regional voices in the statewide visioning process. And then at the end, if timing all goes well, assess interest for a food policy group moving forward. Okay. So we're actually going to go ahead and start with the definition of a food system. So I put two different visuals up here, one on the left to just show, I don't intend to talk about the one on the left, but just to show how complex it could be and how complex it is. And then I want us to see if we can agree to adopt the one on the right, which is a far more simplified version of that. So you have production, which is including grow and harvest and packed. And that either goes to processing or it goes to distribution and transportation. And then you have marketing, which is where food access comes in, as well as markets and purchasing is where food access comes in. Preparation and consumption of that food, and then waste recovery and nutrient cycling. So is there anything that's obviously missing from the simple version?
We are starting, there are several groups starting on the Western Physical, but I think in the formal cycle, it's not always factored in.
Yep.
When we consider this.
Yep. And we're actually, thank you, Callie, for bringing that up. We're actually going to explore within our region where we're working and where there's opportunities to work. And so keep that in mind as opportunity and something that needs addressing in our region. But yes. Perfect.
And then also
Okay. Well, and to me, it seems like labor, and Catherine, please correct me if I'm wrong, overlaps all of that. So yes, I think as we have these conversations, we don't want to forget the people that make that happen and the labor side of that. So just to repeat what was said is Callie and Montrose was saying that the waste recovery and nutrient cycle, as far as she knows, there's potential to work with that in this region. And so I mentioned that we're going to do an activity and a little further in the day that will explore those opportunities. Is that accurate, Callie?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Anything else, Kathy?
I don't know if it belongs in, but I think there's an aspect
Mm,
of agricultural heritage culture. I don't want to be any of the aggressive trying to pass over. I think it is.
Mm.
And it's probably different.
So Kathy from Montrose was just stating that there is also missing the heritage and cultural piece, and that she doesn't want us to live in the past, but does believe that that's something that needs to have consideration. And so I think, to me, again, that's something else that kind of overlays the whole system. And what's interesting is I believe, I don't know the icon on the left intimately, but I think that both labor and heritage and cultural overlap that as well. But something that we'll do when we are reflecting on the past is look at how can we not lose sight of that heritage and culture, and what of that do we want to embrace and hold on to, and what might need clarification at the state level about our heritage and culture. So that is a part of, I think, every food system, and one that we want to draw attention to today as well. Anything else, Audrey?
It's just popping up in my mind, so I'm going to mention it.
Yep. So kind of the what Audrey from Montrose just said was some of the ecosystem services. Is that the word you used? That is also missing, or definitely providing. can't do it without that. We can't do it without our ecosystem, and that's something that needs consideration as well. Oh, got you. Okay, thank you for clarifying that. So that that the food systems have the potential to provide ecosystem services. Okay. Anything else? And again, I recognize that there's a lot that is, again, that's why the diagram on the left to say that this is a very complex thing, and one that I am continuing to learn about myself, and that I think we all are continuing to explore and learn about as well. Kathy?
Water and is things, but they're so.
They are so
And
key.
where does that go?
Well, what is the group thing? Yeah. So we have kind of, and to me that feels similar but different from what Audrey was saying, of we've got this land and water and air that all impact the food system that can't be ignored. So I personally absolutely agree as well. And so we can't do any of what we're doing without that. I mean, it's such a basic, but can often be overlooked.
I would think that those kind of aspects are resources within production.
Yeah.
Because- So like I would, in this model, it falls under the production and a resource of that. You don't have a product without those things.
So Callie has brought up this audience. You guys are going to be so patient while I repeat all this. Thank you. But that really comes under production, and that was my go-to response as well. Are there any other reflections on that or disagreements about that? I saw some nodding of heads when Callie said that.
I would say,
Fair enough. Yeah, so that they also interact with waste recovery and nutrient cycling. And processing, yes. Yeah. And then, but you still have impacts in every one of those areas. You know, as far as distribution and transportation, how far is your food traveling? Things of that nature. So again, I think we have, we can accept that this is a complex system and that there's many components to it, and that for purposes of really even just the next activity that we can, I think, and that's just where Catherine's comment on labor comes in, is what is our role in the food system? Okay, so that's one thing. So moving into who is in the room today, we're going to do an activity which is thinking about what is your role in the food system. So I don't believe I'm taking a risk by saying that we all kind of had this preparation and consumption role. I was joking with my husband. I was like, you could come to the food summit. It's like, you're an eater. And anyway, so we all fit in there. So if that's your main role, great. Identify that as your main role today. If you have a different role, or if the organization that you're representing has a different, a main role in this food system on the right. Hi, Sean. Welcome. Find a seat anywhere you'd like. That's what I want you to use and identify with. So what we're going to do is write on a piece of paper. Virtual attendees will simply share amongst themselves. So we will be sure to mute them, but write on a piece of paper what your main role is in this food system. Again, if you have one besides being just a consumer of consumption, then identify that. And yes, I am going to get cheesy on us. We are going to silently group up with other sane actors in the room. Does that make sense?
Like, no one writing.
Oh. Yes, good point. Good point. So that others can see that. Okay, because that's how you will communicate silently. Of course, I could get like charades on you guys and make you act it out, but I won't go that far today. So I'm going to go ahead and mute the virtual attendees. How did we decide? How did the same button? No, that's meet and speak. Okay. So you've got some paper in front of you. There's pens in front of you, but maybe that's your work. With the work that you do in the community, what is your main role within the food system? And silently group up. To go stand up. And if you're not comfortable standing up, just, make sure people know that and find you.
Penelope, I'm just checking if you can hear us. Okay, so you're done.
Yes, I can find it. We're good. Okay. I'll leave my computer. Okay. Okay. Okay, it's looking like we are mostly grouped. Once you're grouped, and you've already maybe have done a little bit, feel free to share about your, Chris is in a group all of her own. Okay. Okay. You can share a little bit about your role and where you're from, and then talk with someone about who's going to speak and report that out to the group. And it's going to be the same for the virtual participants. Someone from the virtual participants decide who's going to kind of briefly give an overview of who's represented from the attendees. All right, let's take 1 or 2 more minutes. All right, go ahead and finish up your conversations and then head back to your seats, please. Okay. Yeah, perfect.
I don't know if I've noticed, but this like the conditions that we required about everything is really similar to translation. Like if you have added English, if this is the exact same process. I was like, this is what we need to like flexing this message.
Yeah, I'm not gonna give to you and how you share that. Cool. Good function there. All right, let's go ahead and head back, please. Okay, so now I need to unmute myself. Right?
Hello, hello, are we back?
All right, I heard that the virtual attendees were getting some feedback, so apologies for that. But Libby actually had a great reflection that I'm gonna invite her to share.
So in Colorado, as we mentioned, our seeing our population change, one of the often asked to do is be more mindful of potential language barriers. And making this space and trying to be more welcoming and accommodating to folks that might not speak the same language as us. And I was just reflecting that the back and forth and the asking to repeat for the people online, having this transit to a process that would happen So I think it's really good. I want to appreciate the blog work. Because as we start, more we're going to be in situations like.
Great. Thought that was a wonderful kind of aha moment. And to repeat for our virtual attendees, Libby just had just some insight into the patience required with this hybrid setting and how that mirrors and reflects what might be needed when we have multilingual speakers and participants in the room. So this is one, just appreciate the patience, and two, we might see more and more of this as we try and bring in all representations from our community, and as well as our community demographics continue to shift. So thank you for that. I do want a report out. So just kind of like themes and from each group. So hopefully someone was brave and willing to be the speaker from their group, and I'll let whoever wants to start. Thank you, Trish.
So we formed this, we were the prep and consumption because we didn't know what else we did. But come from a variety of backgrounds for and for regional planning side, ways that we were connected in this, and then
Okay. Yeah, so we had the group of prep and consumption. They were, maybe a little unsure of which group they fit into, because they felt like they fit into all. There was some regional work happening, as well as some local work happening. Did I miss something? Okay, thank you. Who else? What other group? Elizabeth.
Hi, my name is Elizabeth, and I am a Colorado native. Generation Colorado native, and has century status on the ranch, which I think is an amazing thing. That is such an honor to have that. And we all fit ourselves into the production and also education component of food, and at the same time feel that there's a lot of education that goes along with that. If we were not in the middle of the pandemic, I would be running a homesteading school, which is designed, I come from a chef and nutritionist background, so it's designed to teach people how to do everything from bake to teach on their own food, cook, they can't aspects. And Kelly and her family are in the process of looking at some diversification projects on their property from just strictly cattle to a lot of other options, including agriculture. So we ourselves as primarily producers have an education role as well.
Okay. So we had a group of producers who also value education and feel like that's part of their calling. I don't know if that's how to say that, but also an important part of being a producer is education. And that looks like a variety of different ways within that group. So thank you. Whom else? Oh, Chris.
So we had several people in two different areas. I was in waste and nutrients recycling, and he was in processing. So we actually do.
Okay.
Our numbers reflect what's going on. So she's new processing. Awesome start to the distillery. Talk about steamboat and just absolutely. Really, our county has no composting whatsoever. Chat about efforts that are happening.
Okay, so we had a group of singles, one in waste and nutrition, one in processing, and Chris had the reflection that feels reflective of the landscape within the region of work on those two nodes within the food system. And so, yes, great. Audrey?
fall under the community access. Have shared working on the which city state and it wasn't a group to and it's Kelly Hepler that was supplying agriculture. Farming techniques. And she's also working on a database that will help people enter Montrose, that is a straw hat, and that is selling local goods. And then myself, I work with Valley Food Partners on the which is seeking to help people access land and education. Also, so I think
So we had a group of 6 within the marketing and distribution side, and it seems like a handful of food access work within that group, as well as, my brain just went blank, some agritourism, store owners, education, thank you. So who else? Is there another group? I'm going to get to virtual. Is there another group that we didn't get? Okay. So I don't know if the virtual group was able to talk since of the so much feedback, but is there anything to report out?
This is Paul. I can jump on. We had some feedback through the chat.
Oops, hold on, Paul, if you're talking, I can't hear you. Will you?
Check
Paul.
too.
Yeah, we're good.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, so we've got a small business owner. It looks like we've got somebody who works for CSU Extension in Eagle County. Then we've got fruit and vegetable farmers on here as well.
Okay. I think you have a ranch. Do you have a rancher?
We may. Those are the ones that oh, we've got sorry, yes. Catherine raises and market beefs as well.
Okay. All right. Thank you. And I think the audience heard that here, so I don't feel a need to repeat that. One question I want to ask, and I actually don't want us to answer, I think we can answer a little bit later in the activities, is who's not in the room, both roles and geographically. I forgot to talk about your geographical representation. Maybe I can do a show of hands. Who's from the west end of Montrose County? Is there any representation from the west end of Montrose County? And type into the chat and Libby can monitor that if there's anyone on virtual from the west end. Okay, how about San Miguel County? Okay, we've got one person in the room from San Miguel County. How about from Ouray County? Okay. Moving on over, Eastern Montrose County. So that's like here. All right. Cimarron, okay, great. And then Delta. Oh, I'm not reporting to the virtual. So for Montrose, we had maybe 10, I'm gonna guesstimate. And then for Delta County, 4. And then Mesa. Got 1. And then I know that we also had, I counted you in Montrose. And then I know that we also had Eagle and Garfield County registered. Is there anyone in the room from Eagle or Garfield? Oh, where's that? Cedar, okay. Okay, great. So, and route, yes, thank you. And I just want to say this before I forget, for the Gunnison participants, there is actually they're aiming for May 25th, a gathering that is including Gunnison, and we are happy to have you here too. I think there was a little bit of like, where should Gunnison fall? So you're welcome to be here, but just so you know about that opportunity as well. But anyway, I think that's a question to ask ourselves is who's not in the room, both geographically and roles within the food system. Okay, that gets into representation. So we're going to move into our first activity, and that is, well, actually, let me explain all the activities. We're going to break up into small groups, and I know many of you are already sitting with folks you don't know. Is that accurate? Okay, it seems that, well, I know not you guys. I'll have you break up. So actually, I won't do the preschool count 1, 2, 3 thing. I'll just ask this table to kind of disperse to tables that may not have more numbers, but let's have at least 5 groups because we've got enough. Maybe I should be more organized about it. Okay, scratch that. I am going preschool. Let's count off. Audrey, we're gonna count off 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So when I point to you, you're gonna say the number. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 4, 5, and then you're 1. You're 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. Kelly. 2, 3. Okay, 2, 3. So let's have 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 grouping up. So virtual, you are already going to be a group in and of yourself. I'm not going to mute yet because I still have explaining to do. Yeah, 4 or 5, I think that you get. Yeah, where are 1? Okay, so let me go ahead and explain the activity. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to start by reflecting on the past. And part of this is I want us to get out there on the table some of the assumptions that people make about our community. Okay, so I want to acknowledge that we have a fairly diverse geographical range, and we're going to explore as we go through this the pros and cons of that and what we may want to do with that moving forward. But for now, let's really get out on the table those assumptions that people outside of our region make about our region. And let's say, especially from the Front Range, because that's a lot of, I know what I've experienced and talked to other people is experiencing feeling as kind of some of that tension that exists between the Front Range and more rural communities and or the Western Slope. So what we're going to do though is like, okay. That was total Valley Girl, pardon me. Let me pause and take a breath. We want to explore positive perceptions of food and ag in our region, as well as critical perceptions. So I know I just spoke about maybe things that are more critical perceptions, but for instance, a positive perception of our region could be innovation. And from a historical context, that comes in with the building of the Gunnison Tunnel. So people, I don't know if this is true, this is for your groups to decide, but maybe a positive perception of our region is innovation because of that Gunnison Tunnel. And that's looking at it from a historical context. We are also taking a liberal definition of the past, and the past could be as of yesterday. So there's a wide range there. Did that make sense? Yeah. Yeah, thank you, Kathy. So the question is, where are we going with this? Where's this taking us? Once we have identified those perceptions, you will write it on a Post-it note, put it up on the sticky paper. For our virtual attendees, they're going to be putting those into the chat. Those are going to be monitored. And then we're going to look at those perceptions and say, what do we want to embrace? What do we want to hold on to of those perceptions? Like, yeah, we own this. And then what do we want to confront and or provide education on and say, actually, Libby, give us some examples of that.
Well, it's kind of getting to the broader.
Can you come closer so I don't repeat you? Maybe that's not fair, that's cheating, but.
So one of the feedbacks that folks heard from the first Colorado Food Summit was that folks didn't feel seen, and there was feelings that there were assumptions being made about one another in the room that weren't being said. And so the idea of this activity is to give voice to some of those assumptions that we might feel when we walk into a room as a representative of agriculture from the West Slope. So one great example is the Pause Act. So is everybody familiar with the Pause Act that happened last year? So between 2019 and 2020, there were a series of events that happened that made the ranching community feel under attack. They felt their livelihood, and please speak, if I say anything wrong, I'm not from a fifth generation rancher. There were a series of events that happened that made folks feel that their culture, their identity, agriculture as this pillar of this state was under attack. And so the Pause Act was a legislation that was proposed by folks that very clearly identified as front range people. Like, they put it out there, we're from Denver and Boulder, and we're gonna get a bunch of signatures, and we want to apply the same animal cruelty laws that we have for dogs and cats to chickens, turkeys, pigs, cows, the whole gamut. So they wanted it, so like words around like euthanasia and inappropriately, they just use this language that villainize many of the foundations of agriculture. So they decided the appropriate, like the most egregious thing that they did, the worst thing they did, was they decided how long a lifespan of an animal was and said you can't kill that animal before it's reached a certain period of their life. And they said a cow should live for 20 years and you should not kill it before it turns the age of 5. Does anybody know when we usually slaughter beef? 14 months. 14 months. So if you said, hey, you can't do that until they're 5, you know what consumers would say about the quality of beef?
This is all.
It was terrible. It was so daily. So that was an example. Another great example is like the meat out day. So historically, or like for the last like 5 to 10 years, I think the governor has signed a thing where you don't eat meat for one day. And it's like the intention is to think broadly about the impacts of our food choices and like, but it was perceived and seen, and also the marketing and everything behind it was done incredibly poorly, and was in a series of events that culminated at our livestock show. Our beef judge asked each of the youth that were in the final round to speak to what was important about agriculture, and hearing the level of fear in these high schoolers about their way of life was heart-wrenching. And so they had seen this event, and so they saw that people were making assumptions about how they make their living. And so I think we're just trying to acknowledge that that's happened in the state and create some space for healing and to put it out there. And or it could be something really small, like all the farmers in this county just grow wheat. Like that's an assumption about like certain counties. So just getting it out there so we can kind of.
So once we have those perceptions that our region has identified that we see as people outside of the region having of us, then we can decide, do we want to hold on to it, like innovation? Like, yeah, we want to keep that. Or do we want to confront and provide education? We don't all grow weed. Like, there's lots of other production happening. Or what do we want to change that we have the power to change within our region? Maybe there's a perception on, we talked about the school one, but now for some reason that doesn't sound.
So I've got a new lettuce grower in my community that moved up from Boulder and is now growing lettuce outside of Hayden. And he's decided that radicchio, there's like all these varieties of radicchio that come from like super cool regions of Italy and some high countries. And they grow fantastic at high elevation in very short growing season. And so while there's a history of, at one point, I don't know if you all know this, but it's like one of our claims to fame, Routt County exported the largest amount of lettuce in the state to Denver. I still do not wrap my head around how this happened. Whether it was like a warm period from like 1919 to 1923, I don't know. But so there was this history in the Strawberry Valley and in southern part of the county, only separate parts of lettuce production. And so there's a couple of producers that are embracing that history and making it part of their narrative now. And so now they're trying to get in the restaurants, being like, celebrate the production of Routt County and what it used to be, or that there's similarities between here and the high Alps of Italy. Tourists eat that stuff.
Yeah. Does that help, Kathy? Okay, contextualize like where that's going a little bit. All right, let me, I'm gonna have Libby look at the chat real quick and see if anything has popped up there before we begin. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and mute in 2 places the chat, and that group will work on that activity, and you will also do that within your small group. Again, you're putting on Post-it notes, you're putting them on the board.
Just like somebody gets this money for this livestock, like I have
If I can start off the chat of for the virtual participants. I think here the positive perceptions of food and agriculture in our region, just the ties to Western heritage, and some critical perceptions. In Eagle County, I would say the biggest criticism here is the perceived water use and maybe some conflicts over grazing of public lands.
Hey Penelope, I'm not sure if you started again, but you're still muted.
All right, virtual, can you hear me? And Paul, if you'll unmute, because I can't see the chat.
Yes, we can.
Oops, but now I can't hear you.
Check, 1, 2.
Okay, yes. Okay, and you can hear me?
Yep.
Okay, so we're gonna do a little bit of a working lunch because as I somewhat predicted but didn't listen to, time management is definitely an issue, but I really appreciated how many connections are happening and how much conversations. So I haven't necessarily wanted to cut that short. But Libby is gonna go ahead and report out on what we saw as far as perceptions go. And then I'm wondering what the best way to go about it, like with each grouping, do we want to go ahead and decide, hold on, we want to hold on to this, we want to confront it, or we want to work to change it within our region? Yep. Okay, so Libby will go ahead and report out on those themes that we saw.
So some of the negatives was around brand management, and perceptions around brand management. That was the historical the pursuit of natural resources in terms of fracking.
I don't think they can hear.
Oh.
Okay, keep going.
Fracking, oil extraction, and kind of that impact on the landscape. There was a number of people that noted that there's a perception amongst consumers that growing food is easy, and that raising animals is easy, and so what's all the griping about? And that kind of leads to this lack of consumer awareness around all kinds of things. That there's a perception that producers aren't willing to change their production practices, that they're stuck in their ways, that they're not adaptive, and a tension between newcomers, old comers, hobby producers, and kind of production folks. And then another one about like that Colorado admits the limitations will never be completely self-sufficient for its own, all the residents that live here, was one of the tags. And then recognizing that both there's a positive and a negative around the self-sufficiency of producers. That rugged individualism leads to really positive innovations, but also a hesitation or resistance to working with others. Those are kind of the negatives. Positives, compared to all the other parts of the state, this region is a bounty. It's well known for lots of different products, and that the producers and the marketing has done a really good job about creating brand identification around those different products. So Lathe corn, Palisade peaches, that there's a real identity with those products. There's also that one, that the rugged individualism also leads to innovation. So that the area has one of the highest concentrations of organic producers, quick to adopt biodynamic like approaches, regenerative agriculture, so that there are people, if individuals adopt those things, that they can flourish in these spaces. That producers, first, lots of folks, producers are seen as land stewards and also stewards of animals, and that's a positive. And that there's a lot of interest and excitement around food and agriculture right now, and cottage foods. There's a lot of energy back there. And then one last one about like the revitalization or the excitement around indigenous food, and the possibility of kind of looking to the past and indigenous ways of production as a way to be more efficient.
Okay, thank you. So as we move forward with the activities, I want us to think about, because what we're going to do next is share about the present. And what I mean by that is one of our objectives is to ensure that as a region, we know what's happening across the region to work on the food system. Because, you know, there may be some that you've already learned of through meeting new folks. There may be some other things that you don't know that are happening that would be a benefit to you and what you do. But then also, you know, with that, what are areas that need some attention? That we, oops, gosh darn it. Hold on. Okay. Where was I? So areas that might need attention, and that could look like, what are those perceptions? You know, it feels, and this may be a poor assumption, so group, correct me if I'm wrong, with the positive perceptions, are those all ones that we want to hold on to? Are those ones we agree? Like, do they seem ones that we could embrace and maximize? General, yeah. So then we're really thinking about with the critical perceptions, what of those areas need attention, either through education or through our own region and what we could do to change that and create new perceptions. Okay. So you're welcome to stay in your group where you've kind of chosen to eat. I know you guys have moved around a lot. If you also are feeling like, oh, I want to go join and disperse, then I would say do that. And I think that's a good idea for this table to do that. And let's, so start with, how is the food system currently being worked with and sharing amongst yourselves, and then we'll report out to the group on that. And then also what areas need attention. And we will do the muting with the virtual. Some great conversation. I was able to take note of some of that. Was there anyone else that was able to take note of the conversation so we can reflect it? Okay, hold on. Will you put them on notes and bring them up? Okay, thank you. So for the virtual, I'm hoping, I don't know if I've been clear with the virtual group. You're welcome to unmute, discuss as a group, and then put into the chat what you find. If the culture of that group is just a chat group, that's okay too. Okay, good. Yeah. And even verbalizing from within the virtual group would help break down the technology barrier.
Well, no, there's no such thing. There's no such thing as one take alternate. Yeah.
It's because they open up in a beautiful plan.
So it's about beauty and not functionality. Oh, yeah.
So while there are folks writing, I'm going to go ahead for time reasons and start reporting out on what we're seeing. I want to start with what is happening now, and I will likely need to, like with LFPA, what is LFPA? What's that?
So the USDA has just allocated a large chunk of money to every state in the United States to purchase global food grown food banks.
Yep.
The problem is that they have identified that only one institution in each state can apply for the money, and then they are responsible for allocating those funds across the state. They also dictate percentage that go to tribal communities versus across the and so the Department of Services is the one applying for the grant. Going to the Department of Human Services, they don't necessarily have long historical ties to agriculture. And they are also one of the additional stipulations of the federal funds is that the money to prioritize purchasing from historically disadvantaged countries. So there's like a lot of
So someone in the audience said, isn't that all of them?
And I also wrote the Colorado Department of Ag of the Mill or grant program because they're putting money towards increasing the number of distributors and processors in the food system. But again, they're prioritizing historically disadvantaged businesses. And it seems like we're trying to have these federal funds accomplish a lot of different things at once, while historically not investing. I try to be like
Diplomatic.
So
Hey.
that's, yeah.
You're projecting amazingly. Great job, but we're still having a little trouble hearing you, Libby.
Oh, yeah, that's the speaker or microphone and speaker.
Am I too close? I don't. Turn it around. Maybe I go this way. Oh, maybe it's. So Paul, what did you get of all of that? Because that was a lot of the things that I've been thinking about.
No, we gotta, it's just kind of, occasionally it was in and out. So I just wanted to say going forward, if we can,
So that's something, like, there's opportunity there, but there's also a lot of limitations or trying to do too much with one opportunity. Like right now, there's just a ton of federal money, but they're trying to check every box under the sun with like this one influx of funds. And I'm worried that they're like shooting themselves in the foot. Not so nice.
So I think kind of some of this is so that we learn what is happening and what opportunities might exist. So some of the other things that we have around what's going on is we do have farmers markets that are accepting alternative currencies. So SNAP, Level Up Bucks. I know that Arbol Market in Paonia does that. The Montrose Farmers Market does. I can't speak to the other markets in the region. DJ does, okay. Telluride does. Okay. And then there's a Hotchkiss Market, and then there's a Delta Market.
I don't believe they're set up for that. I'm sure we're missing other markets when I think about it. Ridgeway, they do accept that, so.
All right, we also have a lot of, not a lot, but some education going on for beginning farmers and ranchers. So there's efforts to bring in new generations of producers. And that is actually something Valley Food Partnership is doing. We're providing education, we're providing mentorship, we're providing land access support. We're also just working on building community and support around those participants. I'm sure there's something else in that I'm missing, but my crew will pipe in if I'm wrong. The Valley Food Partnership also has a program called Local Farmers CRX, and that came up in the group I was talking about with, because one thing that they like is it's teaching people what to do with local food, or what to do with fresh food even. So many folks have not even ever seen a butternut squash before and know what to do with that. So that there's some of that education there. That's really Montrose and Delta counties, I should specify.
It's happening elsewhere.
That's happening elsewhere too. Can you be specific, Chris? Like,
Definitely Western Montrose County, Norwood.
so at the West End, Norwood, is that through the Family Resource Center up there?
But the Uncompahgre Medical Center.
Okay, and Uncompahgre Medical Center, okay. And Paonia got that? Yep. Okay. So, a partnership between Region 10, Montrose County, Delta County, Great Lake BFT,
CSU, Technical College of Rockies, and the Housing Authority.
Perfect. Why don't you give an elevator speech about
Yeah,
that?
so Region 10 was awarded a $1.7 million Rural Innovation Strengthening Economies grant. And we are in the process of renovating a 6,500 square foot building in Olathe there, where we are starting kind of a business hub, entrepreneurship center with commercial kitchen. We'll have a food business incubator. The primary focus of the businesses will target our food and ag businesses and value added. We'll also work with other businesses, really working with startup businesses, expanding businesses to let them start to grow and hire folks. And so we also house the Small Business Development Center for the region. So we'll be doing a lot of that business support on the business side of folks in the industry.
I can add to that too in a weird sort of way. Agritourism providers, there's a number of them that have tours where you come and you learn how to make salsa, or you learn, you learn how
Oh,
to
neat.
make the product, and I've seen that all across our region.
So Kelly is saying that within the agritourism business, that as you go to tour different producer sites, there's also an educational component around how to make salsa, or that was the example she gave. This is really good practicing for my like reflective listening skills. All right, we also have collaborating and networking within organizations, but more in neighboring areas. So maybe this is the first time as a larger region we've gotten, I can't say first time.
I don't know the history well enough to say that, but first time I'm aware of it, and maybe within more neighboring areas, there's more collaboration happening. We have the Russell Stovers. Sean, did you put that up? Who put that up here or wants to speak to that?
Somebody who misspelled it left it out.
I mentioned it in the group, but Sean.
Maybe put it up. She asked me how to spell it, and I was like, I don't know.
Oh, okay.
It's-
So there's been the purchase of the old Russell Stovers building in Montrose, and there is opportunity, there's kind of a multi-folded opportunities. There is a football field size freezer inside Russell Stovers, and that's just one of the freezer spaces within the building. There is, so the opportunities that are being looked for is a anchor tenant to really hold the majority of the space in there, and also frankly make the revenue adequate to keep that kind of refrigeration space open. But if that anchor business can be developed and come in, then there's opportunities for.
Well, if you can get enough, a concentration of a food-based business there, or one that's of substantial size that could do, sourcing of ingredients and stuff for products from the region. That's the hope.
Okay, so that's part of that vision. I would actually, that is happening, some of these, like, that is what's happening now, and there's something around needs to happen with that. That is potential space I want to clarify there. We also have regenerative and biodynamic farming. Looks like that there is some farm to school happening, but that also has been noted as something that needs to happen, as more farm to school. And there's developing shared databases, and that's strengthening connectivity. So I think we've got all of those. Virtual participants, what else would you like to share on what's happening now? Okay. I think I've allowed enough awkward silence to give them the space to pipe up. Feel free to chat into the chat, and Libby can find that. And
Hey, Penelope, I can read some of these, but as far as speaking any more detail to them,
sure, that's okay, Paul. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, some challenges include land price, taxes, labor prices, supply prices, shortages, water shortages, capacity issues, that sort of thing.
Okay. Were there any chats on what's happening now that is worth sharing with the larger group? Okay, great. Actually, Sherry, is what your group doing in Mesa reflected? Under what anything I've said of what's happening now? Did I reflect it out loud though? Because I think it's interesting what you were doing, and I want the rest of the group to hear it. Like around norms and.
Oh, okay. So part of what my role is around food security is really for access, for SNAP enrollment, and so we've been really working on a lot of media campaigns. Proclamation around food security and supporting efforts related to food security for others. And there's a lot going on, but we're really trying to work on reducing stigma and remarks around absence.
I think that's valuable work that's happening, and I wanted others to hear that because maybe there's potential for that in other communities as well. So some of what needs to happen, Paul already reported out on that from the virtual group. Within the table I was sitting in, there was conversation on the need to zero in on issues to focus on, so to really make a real impact and to see that. Because the food system is so complex and we kind of get dispersed and diluted, that's the word I'm looking for, diluted in our impacts because of that lack of singular focus. There was a good input from a number of the group, and that's like, because we can't agree. We can't agree what that is that we need to focus on. As I mentioned, more farm to school, definitely issues, producers supporting themselves. Someone was saying that they want to see all the food banks go out of business, and part of that is frustration at seeing so much of our land and even storefront going towards hemp and marijuana and dispensaries, that there was no concern or value judgment on that being present in our community. It's more the amount of that being present in the community, and that there's still folks going hungry, access to water, year-round opportunities for fresh local food, so like winter tolerant crops. I don't understand this. Need community-driven agriculture, ways to socialize. I don't know how to interpret that.
So we talked about that in our group, is that farming and agriculture in general can be kind of an island or an isolating profession. You socialize with your animals, and your desk is your tractor, and your office is your field. It's not a social activity that we do, and because of that, farmers and ranchers can become their own islands, become very isolated in their ways of like opinions about how something should be done, about how those things, or about how changes should be made. Instead of thinking about things in like, well, this is how it's always been done, or this is how I've always done it. If agriculture could be more of a community thing that is accepting of new people coming in, then we really open ourselves to being the most productive.
I think that's a great participants. Just the historically isolating nature of agricultural producers. But I think the really interesting reflection that I've heard is how the correlation between that, the potential correlation between that and the lack of plasticity in thinking, the kind of stuckness in thinking, and that how so really needing more opportunities for socialization and gathering. Chris?
So that was one of the original things that the Granges were created for, and I know that in Montezuma County, they're really reviving their Grange and doing all sorts of activities involving their young, particularly their young farmers, but I think that's a success that they're having in Montezuma County.
Well, and is that, Chrissy, also talked to me about let me back up. So Chris was bringing up in Montezuma that Granges are kind of getting revitalized, and that's the initial purpose of Granges. Do you feel like the producer build happening in Gunnison also addresses that?
Yeah.
Okay. So there are some things that are happening, and again, even potential ideas for our community on how to work with that. So is there a way to improve ranch to table? We talk a lot about farm to table, and I think the common conception with that is kind of the vegetables and that kind of production, but what about ranch to table? This connection between production excess, not distributed, and folks needing food access. So I think I heard some of that in my group of there's so much production in the area in abundance. We talked about that as a positive perception of our area, but yet we have a lot of folks going hungry. We're considered food deserts, and so really hard, it's just not logical. There's a level of, the word I used was that feels like perverse to me. It's just kind of like, that doesn't make sense, but it is what we have. Software with proof of concept success. So and here's another one, common data collection so it can be shared more efficiently. I don't know what the software with proof of concept success means.
About something Sean brought up in our group with some of the things people are trying to do. They don't know if it's going to work or not. And he was talking about the idea of software with proof of concept and proof of success.
Yes.
So you run your model through and it says, hey, you're going to win, or oh, you're going to lose.
Gotcha. Okay.
I don't know.
Okay. So to repeat for the virtual, this will test me, is how can we use technology to help us plan for the future more? The plan production and
Or
the
predict outcomes.
predict outcomes. Okay. Predict
That creates
outcomes.
that more feeling of comfort zone to try something new.
Gotcha. Okay. So then we have to create bigger demand from consumer to drive production. So this is instead of the production driving demand, it's flipping that around and saying, can we have demand drive production? Okay. So that's a need to happen. Is there anything I've missed? Anything I've missed that was reflected on here that I'm skimming over?
Well, I don't know if it was reflected on there, but we talked a lot about reflected in some of these that there's a reluctance to try something new, certainly from the old school, and Kelly mentioned that with younger folks. But can we address that through proving that it can work potentially through software or
Yeah, the suggestion wasn't so much software, it was
Farm management.
investors
And
coming in.
then we talked about, how do we get this notion of collaboration? So for example, three different producers may have applied for the same thing in a granting cycle and none of them got it. So how can we get this notion that some organization could help bring those folks together and collaborate when it's generally hasn't been a collaborative mindset on the producers?
And there's you guys just said this around Cali, so there feels like a similarity there between that isolationism. And I know I've seen that in other sectors, is that lack of collaboration in a local region dismisses any of the grant applications because of that lack of collaboration.
There's two sides to that. One is having a local organization to bring those who have similar needs together, but there's also at the state level, whoever's reviewing those grants should recognize that there are similar needs and then potentially go to.
Yes,
that
but
region.
because you see that foundation, sometimes foundations will reach back out and say, hey, did you know these folks are doing this and you should talk.
And
But
we hear that all the time about collaboration is important in grant writing, but how do we?
And also one of the things that the Department of Ag is struggling with right now is how much, and this is all like new territory for them. It's like how much they actively influence the grant operation and process, and how much should they make it as transparent as possible, but keep essentially handling. Because they don't want to be seen as picking winners and losers, or like pairing the right people together, or it's so they're very open to suggestions right now. And they've gone through this first round and they would like feedback. So like if this group sees that as potentially something of interest, it would be very low hanging fruit to have a conversation with Brian and CDA and say, hey, our community was not,
things that we thought should be funded, the things that we've seen the need for, were not selected. Can you either provide guidance or input, or is there something that we could done? I think that is super local.
Right?
No.
Let me repeat that for our virtual attendees.
Thank you,
So-
Penelope.
Yeah, so essentially, I can't remember the last thing I reflected. Bringing producers together to collaborate on grants. I'll leave it at that. And then there was, Libby brought up that CDA is currently in the midst of like, we see the need to let different grant submissions know what's happening in their area and to join together, but they don't want to be seen as being influential and or favoritism by doing that. And they're really open right now for input on how to meet that need while also not putting their fingers in the pot.
If I can just maybe climb on top of that and ask a question. So like we applied for that grant at Honey Rock, an orchard, and we're interested in getting a juice and puree machine. That, like last year, a company came into our area on a mobile juicing and puree machine, offered that service. And there are many orchards and vineyards that used it. And so there seems to be the possibility, there are many that be interested in this. So we submitted our application, but we're blind to anybody else that may have also submitted a similar, request in our region. But we're very open to collaboration. So I could write the CDA and tell them, hey, you can make it known to anybody else that applied for this, that we would be open to talking with them and collaborating, and you can liaise and mediate that relationship for us.
Yeah, totally. Individual, like.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is say, either reading a letter of recommendation or just talking to the Department of Ag about how do we can we add, this is a need in our community. We recognize this as a need.
Maybe that has historical parents in nonprofit work to us that if we're going to get any kind of grant, we have to collaborate. We have to have letters of support. So it's like second nature, and I'd be interested to know maybe what the Department of Ag's fear is of saying.
Well, they try to make it a super easy application process, so it's super simple.
It was really simple, but we asked, I did get a letter of support from the Talbots. It was like, but me, I got a Talbot letter of support. But yeah, I would want to encourage them to kind of play a role of a value chain coordinator, to just actively take that on a little bit, come into the community and try to draw out what is, like I was talking to Tom Kay, who's just here, and they could be interested in doing something, pulse crops, chickpeas or beans or but you need to get a critical mass of producers that are interested in that to, go in on the processing facility together so you can cover that cost. But then you also need a market for that. So it just seems like that value chain coordination really needs to take place. You can kind of leave it up to all the producers to just sort of work it out, but I don't think it happens very well.
So let me do a little bit of reflection for the virtual attendees. So some of where that conversation went is, again, that it might be low-hanging fruit to give this feedback to the CDA and give them some ideas on how to, actually, I thought Sean had a very, I don't know that it may be too simple, but an idea of like, can you just say, please share my name or business with other entities? Like it could, and then there's choice in that and an ask for that. And then maybe that feels like less fingers in the pot.
It also takes the responsibility off of the CDA.
Yeah.
You're given permission to
legit like plays its role.
Yep. And
You can make that part of the application. You could say, are you?
that's what I
willing
thought,
to
was it would be the
share,
application
you
process.
know, I would release them from the burden. and
Yeah.
maybe open it up.
So, yes.
One of the things that we did,
Mhm.
And so, like, these grants are great,
Mhm. Mhm. A lot of capacity to do that. Yep.
in North Fork Valley, yeah, a lot of people are going, right, there's probably plenty of local rain.
That need has been described in a number of meetings I've been at all across Colorado. Where you didn't know she needed beef and you grow beef and you're 3 miles from each other. Right, that's connecting the producer to the buyer.
Aggregated local food market.
But whatever.
All aggregated supply that's available, they are invisible to people to buy.
So I heard two things that have been questions within the North Fork Valley. One is what potential diversified funding could come in to support producers whom are struggling to pay their workers and are already selling direct to market top dollar. So, and we know they're not like going out on their yachts in the summer, meaning they're not just pocketing that money and not paying labor, but then also how do we connect supply to demand? I mean, I think that's the simple way to say that, although I recognize that it's far more complex than that. So we have 5 minutes. I want to acknowledge that, and it feels like we've just got going. So Chris, I'll let you say one thing, and then I want to talk about how to wrap this up and what to do next.
So one of the things in my mind, all the different work we've been doing here is we still don't know. This is a food policy council. On the Western Slope, there are still so many players who do not know what each other's doing. Because I reconnected with Kelly on the Food Farm Forum, found out about, Pete in the North Fork Valley, who's got a whole bunch of stuff going on. And Rachel from La Plata County is not here, so I still think that is a huge gap that we really need to work on so that we know what each other is doing, have the idea of potential collaborations, and your ideas on how to move all these things.
Yeah, so what a great segue, Chris. So I'm not going to repeat what Chris said because I'm going to, I think, lead us into a question for this group. First, I need to get my cheat sheet because that's like my classifier. And so what we were going to do next is to talk about from these areas that need addressing.
But we were gonna go we've already done some visioning of the future. I feel like we're talking about some of these needs and what needs to happen. Oh, we did not get to welcoming spaces. I feel like that's important. Let me again though take the bait that Chris gave me and say, as far as representation goes, I feel like we spoke adequately in the beginning of how this will feed up to the state level. I do want to say that I encourage everyone that can to go to Denver December of this year, to come and bring your voices to the table, but also know that these conversations are feeding into that. I intend to go and represent these conversations, but I welcome you and everyone else to come as well to do that. At the regional level, what do we want to do? I want to acknowledge that we do have a wide geographical area. We've got, I mean, how similar is what's happening in Mesa relevant to what's happening in San Diego? I don't know, but those feel like very different communities to me and likely have very different things going on. I know that Garfield and Eagle, this was the meeting that they came to because there was no other meeting for them. So is this our geography or do we need a different geography? And that's not to say that, of course, the North Fork Valley isn't going to keep doing what they do in the North Fork Valley. This isn't to take away from that. It's just to say that there are many similarities happening on the Western Slope across that region. And how can the power of the collective move forward in those ways? So that was the question I hope we would address is geography. Is there interest and momentum? It certainly seems like it from this, what's happening, what needs to happen to explore having a food policy coalition, council. I mean, those two different words that get used. Is that an accurate assessment? That actually, maybe why don't you give us a concrete example of what some of the issues that your council had worked on and made true impact on?
Yeah, so, I worked
I think it started in 2012 with funds from Live Well Colorado. And they've done a whole slew of things. And what they're a very loosely affiliated network. Once a month or quarterly, what the need is at the time. And then they kind of coalesce around particular subject areas. So at one point it was food waste. Another time it was food access, institutional purchases, and then they come together and kind of think about the issue, kind of do an assessment of what other communities are doing around that topic. And what's ended up happening in our community, we have a frightening amount of nonprofits. We have a county of 20,000 people, and we have over 300 registered nonprofits. And so what we've ended up doing is just spinning off those projects into a nonprofit or a for-profit entity. So one example is the composting project that we talked about, that we saw composting food waste was an issue. One of the local groups, the Yuba Valley Sustainability Coalition, took that into their mission statement, started bringing people together. A local producer that was doing microgreens and mushrooms saw a opportunity between that business and food waste. And so he brought it in his business model, but had the partnership and support of community members as well as nonprofits to do in the city, to do a central drop off at the local rodeo grounds, where people would bring their food waste. And then the community members started doing, they would have bins at their house and everybody in their neighborhood would drop off product in there. And so it's grown. So that's like an example of like an idea from here, getting kind of people energizing around it,
handing it off to a business to take it to that next level. Another kind of low hanging fruit one that we had, because our geography is pretty much the county and sometimes Moffett. With ag businesses, when people wanted to try a new business, if they wanted to do a little bit of ag tourism or put a greenhouse on their property or look at aquaculture, it can be intimidating, the regulatory process at the county level. So there was a need around regulation to business, and the county extension office heard that and essentially is now an ombudsman for ag businesses. So they will bring together all of the regulatory bodies, environmental health, planning, water, building department, all into one room, and they'll have the business fill out kind of a form, and then they'll talk through it with those different departments to make sure that the departments like, that your regulation directly impacts your regulation about snow management, snow storage, and just have that conversation. So that's like, it didn't cost any money to do those things. It was just see a need and how to step into that space. So those are the things that we also worked with the commissioners to write a letter against the PAWS Act to the newspaper. One of our local nonprofits has started a micro loan program. So they do super low interest rates for producers that at the beginning of the season when they need to buy something, or during COVID when they needed to shift their marketing, that there were funds readily available in our community to just get out there so that they could make that pivot. So that's kind of examples of how we've done it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And the grants, what are possibilities?
Is there interest in exploring that further as a region? I see one thumbs up, and there's no like peer pressure here. Please note that I am not trying to force something. I know we all have a lot of meetings and a lot to attend to, but I have been inspired by this idea the more I've learned about it. And I think there's a lot of potential to really make concrete change in our region. And then ideally what's happening in the region is informing the state anyway. So yes, Kathy.
Penelope, how does that interface with the objectives of the regional system partnership?
Well, the Regional Food System Partnership has direct objectives around, I think there's something there in value chain coordination for sure. So Kathy's asking about the planning grant that VFP got through USDA. And so we are, as an organization, exploring value chain coordination and training other entities to do that value chain coordination. So Sean and I talked about it as like a train the trainer model, but it's not just us with that information, but we're helping that with others. So I think that's one way that some of these issues are being addressed. But then it's also specifically around like sharing of common pool resources, so such as data. And so I would hope that the Regional Food System Partnership would be represented at the group and talking about what's happening. And some regions are doing this with regional food system planning grants. So I'm saying, what I'm saying is that wasn't the focus of our planning grant, but then I'm also saying some other communities are using this as their focus. I don't know if that answered your question.
Yeah, I was thinking one aspect that it was something for regional players to come together and have a voice in how to build it. I was just trying to sort out that versus you're talking about the establishment of a regional system council.
Yeah, I think those two things could go together in time. Right now, as this is a planning grant, what we're doing is planning a communication system among a small set of proof of concept people that we can work it out among a small group of people and then introduce it to the community as something we can all get on board and use, which is a digital version of a real physical in-person social kind of meeting and action group. But I think the two would go very well together. And so if we're successful in September, we should have a nice little demonstration of our proof of concept communication platform where this kind of a council, people that are trying to collaborate, work on value chain collaboration, a regional food system, have a place to share information. If there's also part of that is standardizing record keeping on farms so that we can share our information in a standardized way. And hopefully that standardized record keeping system also helps to improve farm management so that it has inherent to it its own incentive for people to adopt using it, because hopefully it can help create greater efficiencies in labor or inputs or cost management. That sort of thing. But
And we still intend to have an in-person side
Yeah.
to it, both in the proof of concept, not, I shouldn't say proof of concept, but in the social framework
Yeah.
of what we're looking at doing. And so this could be, I just want to be mindful about not marrying them.
Yeah.
100%, mostly because what that particular work might be doing will overlap, but I don't think it's one and the same.
it could become a springboard to the kind of thing
Exactly.
that Libby was explaining. And it could become a really good tool in the tool shed for a group that would like to do that kind of organizing.
Or maybe the development of regional policy council group could give the definition. Next one, try to come after this day to actually give financial support to the regional group as part of the trying to do this grant.
We need to,
Not
now to bookmark that idea.
I just want to be respectful of people's time. I'm assuming that you'll leave if you need to leave. And I mean that about the virtual attendees too. What I will commit, I'll tell you, Chris, in just a second, but what I will commit to this group is doing a follow-up. And what I mean by that is sharing out what we have brainstormed and discussed. And I also, there was one. Follow up from this meeting. Oh, as well as once I know something about the December meeting, I will also share that out. And then, Chris, what were you gonna say?
Oh, I just was gonna support the notion of the policy council. I was part of the Colorado Food Policy Network for many years
Okay.
as an unpaid person with no actual organization, but a great deal of interest. So I think it would be great if, as a person with unpaid and limited capacity, I think it would be a great thing to have. And I think we've matured to the point where there are many voices that want to come together to do this. So I think the time is right.
Okay, thank you. And I respect your opinion because you have been in the landscape for quite
A long time.
a long time, okay. Fair enough, Chris. So I will also send out, I'm a processor, and so I don't always have things like right at the top of my head, and I have to go home and let things percolate a little bit. But I also, that's one thing I want to say. Please note, I don't see this as needs to be something that just DFP does. I said that to Chris earlier, is if we're covering a wide range, maybe there's some key stakeholders in each area that we can get together and host a council. And we rotate and yes, but it's more of an effort making that happen. So I am committed to continuing to explore this as a part of DFP, and I also welcome others to collaborate with DFP to make this happen. Okay, so I will send out communication about that. How big is that? my word. So thank you all for your time. I hope you have found it valuable. I have appreciated it. It's been, Libby and I were saying how energizing it's been to have been in a room with other professionals and just having these conversations. It's been a cup filler for me at least. So, and thank you, Libby, for traveling down here. I do think there's the potential for statewide support on a regional level as well. So I do think the time feels right as well. So. That's a wrap. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you, Penelope. I went ahead and this recording is in the cloud, so you
Okay.
should be able to access it on your Zoom account.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much.
All right, I'll stop the recording now.
Sounds good.